Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about cloud testing. Yeah, short introduction to me. First thing I always ask when I'm in a European conference is the question: do people know the company called Cognizant? Yeah. I hear a lot. I hear more yeses than I expected. Okay. For those, we're one of the largest IT companies in the world, and we have about 34,000 testers nowadays. Don't actually know the exact number, but tomorrow's going to be higher. That's me. A little bit normal. It's a little bit smaller than that. I have 15-year experience in testing, and one of the reasons why I'm presenting here is because I've written a book a few years ago called Testing Clouds with my former employer. If some of you want to read it after this presentation or not, you can still download the e-book for it, I expect. But yeah, I cannot share the link because it's another employer. Currently I work for Cognizant in the Netherlands, in Benelux as we call it. Well, that's a little bit about me. I have 45 minutes and I have 45 slides. And I want to do it in 30 minutes. Because normally I get more get questions during the presentation, but I already knew questions come mostly at the end, so I know. I keep it that way. First, I'm going to stand here more than there, and it's sometimes a little bit weird for me to look up. So if I don't look you all upstairs, forgive me. We're now in what we call the cloud era. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I started in it. At that time it was the hype. Everybody wanted to move to the cloud, all organizations, and I always showed this picture of a dark cloud. Because I'm a tester, and all these hypes are always very nice, but how does it affect me as a tester if all these things are there? And I'm a tester, I'm always kind of negative. The nicest thing I always think about testing is I want to break things. So I wanted to break the cloud. I failed, by the way, so if people were asking me at the end. But still, cloud is here, and it's here to stay. It's still one of the most talked about IT concepts that is there. Nowadays, 2014, 15, 16, I've seen the real companies now really saying, okay, I'm moving to the cloud with their infrastructure, but also with their services. And with that, of course, comes also the testing. So, that I want to talk about. What companies do there? I just named a list. For all these are, of course, there are much more companies that provide clouds, but these are the most seen and used. And we as Cognizant provide also a cloud, but I purposely didn't put it here. Then, what is a cloud? How many of you are working in clouds environments? 3, 4, 10, okay. Maybe you have a different opinion on what a cloud is, but this is what I say the cloud is, and this is where my presentation is based on. So we have the same starting point. It's on-demand, self-service. I'm going to battle over here. We have resources are pooled, and resources is infrastructure and people. Everybody can access it. If you have the access, of course, but you can access it from everywhere. It's highly elastic or agile, some people say. It's measured, you pay as you go. You're not the only one there. Third-party integrations, a lot are there, and device and location independence. That has to do that you can access it anywhere. This is my starting point for what a cloud is. And a cloud for me is, again, infrastructure, but also sometimes the service that is there. Utilization rate of test environments, 15%. I checked it, the numbers about 2-3 months ago. My old slides that I had was 13-14%. It's still 15% of traditional test environments is only used 15%. That's extremely low. Even if you look at normal IT, it has 36%. So we're not utilizing all that infrastructure. And that's why somebody in the 60s, we're talking about the 60s, 1964, somebody invented the idea of cloud computing. And at the time it didn't have the name cloud computing, but it was just resource pooling. So this way, nowadays we're not using our infrastructure correctly. And that's one of the reasons why we have cloud. The other thing is, I've heard it a lot. I was also at a session before here from us. It's about speed to market. We want to go to the market faster, more agile, DevOps nowadays. All these things need to be done, and our traditional environments are not ready for that. And we want to have environments that are elastic. It's not really that, put on this screen, sorry for that, that are very elastic. We want to go, now we want to have 100 users on it, and we want to build it up today, and in 3 days we're not needing it anymore. We're doing a 2-week sprint, 2 weeks is there, then the whole environment can be broken down again. One of the reasons why we have these clouds, why we have cloud environments and cloud test environments. Because in the end, it's only all about one thing, money. Faster to market, you can get more money out of it. If you're already tested it on high usage rate, low usage rate, there's money in that. All those things is about money and moving from a capital expenses, CapEx, into operational expenses, OpEx. And of course, it needs to be compliant. Everything needs to work and it should work as we want it to work. That's why all these reasons why we have it in the cloud. So, the testing cloud. What's in it for us testers? Well, split for me into 4 things. Applications running on the cloud, or nowadays cloud applications, Salesforce. Test tools that are provided by tool providers that are cloud-based. HP has a SaaS solution, which is basically your on-demand service for providing test tools. Resources, crowd testing, cloud testing, depending on who you talk to. So we share resources and we use them amongst other, you have only pure on-demand testing. And infrastructure. I think that's the most famous, most used one at the moment, but your infrastructure is in the cloud. And first on that one. In a normal situation, the most perfect situation that everybody wants is this. We have a development environment, we have a testing environment, we have an acceptance environment and production. I've been doing testing for 15 years, and I think in 80% of the time, clients, organizations don't have this. They have development, sandboxes, they might have a test environment, but most of the time they have something that is an acceptance environment, and of course they have production, because they need it. But if I test, and I test different layers or different levels, I have to be aware that I'm the only one in that environment, that I have all the data that is there, and it happens that if you don't have acceptance environment, or you only have a test environment that's maximized to 10% of your production size, that I cannot test enough. Was a few years ago, we were testing pension schemes, and I needed a test environment that was 100% copy of production. So we got into a discussion with the infrastructure team. He said, why do you need 100%? Because that's going to cost you about, a project about 70, 80,000 euros. I said, I got that solved. Every scheme that is not printed out correctly cost the company 125,000 euros. And then he saw some eyes blinking up and he said, okay, I understand, you're covered. But still I had that discussion. If I had the discussion in the cloud, now in the cloud era, I just go online, I click on some things and I have this environment up and running. If it's correctly, of course, created, or at least, set up. But you can have that sleeping environment just running it when you need it and you close it down again. So, and these environments can be very differently. There can be a lot of things in there. And a lot of things that are not in there. For instance, I come to that later, but some things you don't want to move to a cloud. Or you want to move to a public cloud. A private cloud. There's some things where I say, for now still, don't move them to a cloud. So you can decide, but you can have things that are, this works. You see here, yeah, you have things that you have outside of your cloud, you have a VPN connection to the internet, and it's in your cloud. You can have a decision, but you can also say, I want to use something directly towards that cloud. So you can choose yourself how that infrastructure will look like, just by, like I say, clicking of a mouse. And clicking of a mouse, I always like this one because this is also nowadays almost from prehistoric sizes because it's from 2010, 6 years ago. And it's still true. This is the IBM cloud for people who are into these things, and what we've done, we wanted to set up a DB2 environment. If I'm correct, which is another one nowadays. Oh, it's is this the DB2?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see it correctly. And normally, my DBs, database administrators, they took them 2-3 days to set this correctly up. So what they did, they set it up one time correctly, we set it to sleep mode, and we turn it on again. And it took us, we set it up at 10:54, and it was running at 11:03. So a few minutes later, we had the up and running environment. And normally, otherwise, it took us a few days. Say with all the connections, if you have to check everything, it took us a week. Of course, this is only one database, but you can have this all for everything. And just by the click of a mouse. I always say one but, because I said here some things you don't want to have in the cloud. One thing that I still say, don't put in the cloud, and maybe nowadays people still are correcting me, but I still get to it. Mainframe. Old legacy systems. Why? They're totally not elastic. You have one mainframe. And if you have a server that is twice as fast, you have one mainframe. It still does the same. And if you do it in the cloud, which uses virtual services, of course, you're still going to have one. If you do 200%, it's going to be 2 maximum. It's not going to be faster. You only have 2 of those instances. So it doesn't support anything if you use the mainframe. There are solutions now going on, but I still feel they're the best. It's just a bandage. It's not really there, so I always say keep your test environments, which are mainframe, keep them just on your own systems, in-premise. It works the best. The other thing, that's something in relation to tools. Tools are very, when you move to the cloud, they're easy to operate, but there are also more services around it. And what do I mean with services? Well, that's the next slide, is you have multiple testing tools around there. Functional testing tools, test automation, there's mostly test automation, performance testing, load testing, security testing, others of course, that you can run from a cloud environment. And I highlighted the performance testing especially because it's still green and it's slightly smaller than functional testing, but that's where I see is the most added value for cloud. In 2014, a company started called SOASTA, or SOASTA, I don't know how they call it, which allows you to create enormous loads from the cloud. They use the Azure cloud and they use the Amazon cloud to create enormous loads to test on your system. Where, for instance, HP Load Runner, the most used performance test tool, stops somewhere around 100,000 users. But if I have a system that I want to test with 500,000 users, I don't know how to do it with HP Load Runner. There are tools out there now that can do that, and HP has provided a tool called Cloud Burst, which is just the same. You can test 500, 1 million, 2 million users at the same time. Where I said we have a company of 230,000 resources, and sometimes we need to test also our internal systems. So we have these loads also. And it helps you for performance testing also. I'll show you why. Performance testing is not always what you do daily. Maybe now at DevOps becomes more daily-ish, but not daily. So you have these certain loads you want to copy. Well, you have these unpredictable, it just goes on. Predictable, you know, for instance, Amazon knows perfectly that the day before Thanksgiving they have the high, or basically the day after Thanksgiving, but around Thanksgiving they have the highest load. So they have to have available all those infrastructure to them at that moment. But you still have to test for that. Does it work at that level? Periodic, I have to do my end. I always have to give my numbers at the end of the month and the forecast at the beginning of the month. And I'm only what I'm doing for my work, but there are also a lot of companies that have to do that every time. So they know when there's a high load on their systems, early in the month, end of the month. So all those things you can work out in your test. And hide users, that's on cloud, of course. And you have to understand the test architecture blueprint. This is, my apologies, this is incorrect in the slide deck. I'll go a little bit back on that. On test infrastructure, that's about. One of these issues that I've seen a lot of times with any organization is they don't know how their infrastructure looks, especially the larger clients. And why do they don't know how their organization looks? Because they have these blueprints that are this big and there are layers upon layers and they miss things. So when you try to move things to a cloud, you need to know what's there. And things that help you there are these simple Excel sheets, which is just a document basically where you just tick off, but it helps you, okay, what is there, what is there, what is there, just to help you around it. And we use these for every time that we go to an organization that says, I want to go to the cloud, or I want to do service virtualization, we always use these tools around it. The other thing I talked about is resource pooling. Well, if I look at the Netherlands where I come from, 2020 we have 150,000 less people that we need a year. So the year next to that we need 300,000 people more, and we don't have those people available. Of course, we can get them from other countries. But it's also about, okay, there are around the world, there are people in China who are testing, there are people in India testing, there are people in Lithuania who are testing that can support my clients in the Netherlands. So you can also have those resources shared. Well, there's also something there, some service called software testing as a service. But there you access, you're the best talent worldwide. There are companies, Cognizant does it, but also a company called UTest. I'm also tested for themselves sometimes. That provides you the option of bringing your application to them, and it gets tested by people worldwide. And you pay per defect, unique defect. So you only pay for the defects that are found. So you don't have to pay for 20 testers that are doing it for a month or for 5 months. No, you pay for that. The prices are set, it's 24/7 of course, then moment somebody in China logs in, and the other moment somebody from New Zealand or from Lithuania or from the US logs in, and do the testing, what some people call 3.0. Everything is integrated, so they log the defects, I get the defects to my system and say, okay, this is a unique defect, that's when I pay for, I've already seen this one, I'm not going to pay for that. Whole system, and it simplifies all the complexity around testing. So it's testing 3.0, but at least better testing 3.0. And it can use it around a lot of applications. All these applications can all be thrown into the cloud and work there with that route. And the thing which I looked into my book myself the most is the next one. Is the test strategy. What we're used to is testing a normal application, which is, say, SAP. It runs on a server, on-premise, and the whole infrastructure is set, the application is set, we just have to run if it integrates with the system. When you look at a cloud application, it's based out of 3 layers. Your IaaS, infrastructure as a service, your platform as a service, and your software as a service. All these things can come from different providers. So for instance, if I'm testing a Salesforce application, which is the software, and I'm running it on an Azure cloud, on maybe a Linux or set in Windows, but on different environments, and I find a defect, where does it come from? So you have to change your strategy a little bit on how you do your testing. Still, there are people, you have to weigh your risk, and it's still you have to look at the results there. That's the same, but you have to how you test the application is a little bit different. Instead of straight to the application, you have to make sure that you cover all bases. For instance, you have an application that you focus more on functionality. Well, you focus more on your software. Security, even that's your business users, or maybe infrastructure. Performance goes to your platform. That's where you look at the application. So you have to be aware that you test not on one layer, but on 3 layers. I sometimes call it a 3D testing strategy, because you have to look at all these phases. But you need to be aware of those things, and that's the tricky part sometimes in getting this resolved, getting that mindset with the people that they understand, okay, if I find a defect on this SAP environment, it doesn't mean that it's SAP is wrong. It can be the infrastructure that is wrong because it's from another provider. So you have to look around on where. Well, I show you some of the providers, but here a little bit more detailed, where people are looking at. Well, here you see nobody is doing everything. IBM, Windows Azure, and Amazon a little bit now more and more days are doing more on the infrastructure and on the platform. Opposite, we're providing infrastructure, Google the same. Facebook, more applications in the platform. So, but all these things are integrated nowadays with each other. Google App Engine is getting used more and more. With a client that is using Gmail, you say that is used mostly by a lot of people, but they have the corporate version. If you use the free version like I do for my personal emails, you're still working on a beta version. But the version that is used by that organization is the official version from Google. So that also runs on multiple layers. And the implementation there went not so easy sometimes as you would expect. So what are things where I say are the risk around cloud applications? One thing, is my data secure? Or am I the only one to access it? Or is it located in a place where I am allowed to access it? For instance, personal private data in the European Union is only allowed to be stored inside of the European Union. So if I use a cloud infrastructure from Amazon, which store their clouds in the US, I'm officially at risk that I'm not following rules and regulations. How often do you backup? One famous story here is from Amazon in this case. A few years ago, one of the centers from Amazon, their data centers, failed. Netflix, which is running on the Amazon cloud, could provide services to the whole East Coast. And they have to pay all the people back the money for those days that it was unused. Because that's how Netflix works. However, nowhere in Amazon's statement says that it is responsible for keeping up the cloud. It just says we have it and that they backup it. That they have to backup it. They only say we have it, if it fails, sorry. So Amazon didn't do any backups. That's not what they did, that's not their service. Netflix, they had to copy a lot of data from their other data center towards when it was up and running again. So they even lost even more money. Something you have to look into. Like I said, what if I lose connectivity? Performance. Something I've myself got to use the negative result with. We used a cloud-based mobile testing lab, which was based out of Phoenix. And we used it in Amsterdam. The first thing I asked myself is there any data lag? Because one thing I know, if the cloud service is based out of, for instance, Germany, 25 milliseconds, that's what you expect normally from response from a computer, stops somewhere north of Spain, if you draw a circle around it. So if you run it in Phoenix, I would expect a lot of delay coming into Europe. I was promised that there was no issue, it was working, etc. First test I ran. Click. It didn't work. After a minute or 10. So performance was terrible. How can I loss recover data? If nobody makes the backup, how can I lose it? Are we compliant? I'm going to go into that a little bit. And confidentiality. How do I know that this company, this cloud provider doesn't share my data with others? That nobody else has the access, because that's something you give out. Other thing, which is the nice thing about a cloud, is it's standardized most of the times. That's one of the things you have to do there. I like this picture, but Henry Ford said it in the early 1900s. You can have any color you have as long as it's black. But that's also with cloud applications. The successful ones are the ones that are standardized. Salesforce, highly successful. It works the way it works. It does the same as SAP CRM, but SAP CRM you can change everything on. Salesforce, you have a few parameters, but it works. So if they do an update, they update everybody on the same way. Where nowadays, when you do an SAP update, you have to file a complete project in seeing if it works. Do the whole migration. Because and these things. And that way you have to look at capacity and your capability. All these things you have to align inside of your new business model in this case. Because, like I said earlier, it's all about the money. But be assured on one thing, it all sounds very nice. You have these cloud environments, it runs on demand, etc. But it's also about, for instance, my company gives me a company car. It's a lease car. It means they pay a certain amount of money for it, and I can drive that car. If I drive it daily, it's quite nice. But if I only drive it once every 3 weeks, it's quite expensive. So that's why you would say rent a car. And if I have to run it, if I have to have my own car, it's another situation. A cloud basically is either leasing or renting. So you have to be aware that you have to pay for it. It's cost reduction sometimes, but also if you move your whole infrastructure to the cloud, which you're using daily, pay up. I had a discussion once with that he told me this, with a broadcasting agency in London. He was a really cloud expert, a guy I really look up to. And he was one of the first to move everything to the cloud. What they did is they found out that it was more expensive for them to move everything to the cloud. They had everything virtualized, no problem, but their usage rate was so high is that they moved too much. So what they changed is they said, okay, this is our normal usage rate, say 60%. That's what we keep on-premise, on our own databases. The rest, if we have a peak load of 80 or 100%, that's when the cloud service starts in. And then when you really get the benefits of the cloud environment. Because you can also have a private cloud there. Other thing, security. A lot of things that I get here is, what if others have access to that? Security is always a challenge. With IoT coming up, it's even more and more around that. Because there's a cloud environment, it's running in Germany, and there's Cognizant on it, and there's Huawei on it, and there's also somebody who is maybe not really allowed to go onto it. It's maybe for him easier, because he's already in the infrastructure, to access that data. So you have to be sure that all these cloud providers are secure. And rest assured, I've, at least from my opinion, if somebody corrects me there, please, I have not heard of any on the real cloud providers, I'm talking about IBM, I'm talking about Amazon, etc., that they have had a security breach. But still, it's something you have to think about. Data security, the Privacy Act and rules and regulations, those things coincide with each other. Because, I explained, there are different rules around the world on this. US. US, I don't know if you know, you have the Patriot Act. Patriot Act says that whenever I think, as the US government, that some terrorist activity is going on, I can barge in and have access to everything. That's what they say in the US. In Europe, they say private data is private data. You have to get a lot of warrants to really have access to the private data. But what if I store my private data in the US? And well, Mr. Trump gets selected in a few weeks. Hopefully not in my case, but some people think differently, and he thinks by himself, whoa, I have all these data here from China, from Europe, etc. I just called them terrorist. And I can bring Trump enterprises even higher. That's not allowed. There was a Safe Harbor Act, which was killed about 4 months ago, and there's now a new Safe Harbor Act 2, and I think it's even called that way, which allows that the data in the US, which is from European clients, acts like a embassy. So it's like they're in Europe. So Mr. Trump doesn't have access to data, but that was not there whenever all these things started. The other thing is, like I said, India. I work for Cognizant. We do 80% of our work in India, but also working with European clients. So how can my testers in India have access to production data, or data at least, in Europe? We cannot store it there. You have to look at that. And even within Europe, there are different rules and regulations there. In the Netherlands, you can at least store things outside of the inside of the European Union. In Germany, it says all the data should stay in Germany. Switzerland, of course not the European Union, says all data or all processes are not allowed to move outside of Switzerland. So you have to look around these things. And if we wanted to set up a test environment in Germany for Switzerland, and then we get into issues. So you have to remember that all these things are also there. Looking at my slides, I'm almost there. Also, is it reliable, and are the agreements there? What is in the contract? What I explained with Amazon there. Now, summarizing as far as I can. You're allowed to free yourself, sounds nice, from all the hardware issues. You have the availability for it everywhere, be effective, and you collaborate everywhere. You have to look at the changes in your test strategy. It's not only anymore one flat application you're looking at, but it's multi-layered. Test environments can run from the cloud, test tools from the cloud, test the cloud itself, security and rules and regulations. That's, I said 45 slides, this is number 45, so 5 minutes left? Any questions? Or none, the council. If there are any questions at the end, I'm still around, I think, till 8 or something, so you didn't ask me. Thank you.